Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere at some time along an infinite line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Join us on a journey into the improbable.
Today's story, episode 282, Quality Assurance, read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. 10 years ago, we published an earlier version of this story under the title, Driven. Somewhere and sometime, could a machine be more human than its human creators?
Vlad fumbled to find his prosthetic, nearly knocking it onto the floor. With the last of his savings, he had acquired the fake forearm on the black market. It was old, but good enough to mimic his biometrics, so he could remove the intrusive wrist tracker for up to 6 hours before the surveillance programs would get suspicious. From its insistent and particularly annoying vibration, he knew someone was trying to call and suspected it was seniors maintenance checking up on him. Had they finally caught on to his little ploy with the prosthetic forearm? Vlad cursed as he struggled to remove the stubborn device from the imitation arm and slide it over his wrist. This would have been trivial 2 years ago, but his eyesight had deteriorated to the point where even simple tasks were challenging. "Hello," he answered gruffly, intending to offend the person on the other end. "Am I speaking to Mr. Zerman?" the voice politely inquired. Vlad cringed, recognizing the subtle artifacts in the speech. "You're just a stupid machine," he spat back in disgust. It was the only voice call he had received in over a year, and it was a crummy artificial intelligence. And judging from the awkward inflections, it wasn't even a high-end one. But then, he reminded himself, who would waste the money on an actual human to call an 80-year-old legally blind ward of the zone? "Yes, this is Zerman," he huffed. "Good evening, Mr. Zerman," the frustratingly calm machine replied. "I am a placement agent for the Department of Senior Citizen Maintenance Cost Recovery Unit. As you know, your seniors guardianship agreement allows zone administration to contract out your services to offset your maintenance costs, and I have good news. We have found a position which matches your unique combination of experience and physical limitations. Please report to the front door of your hospice tomorrow at 8:00 a.m. You will be picked up there." "But I'm blind," Vlad protested. 87% blind, Mr. Zerman," the machine automatically corrected. "Your limited visual acuity, along with your background in software quality assurance, makes you ideal for this contract." "But I'm not able to—" "Mr. Zerman, you are within your rights to refuse placement," the machine explained. "However, if you choose to do so, the department can terminate or reduce your maintenance," which meant Vlad would be on the street begging. He stared out the small window of his cubbyhole. Outside, the sky had turned a steel gray and was threatening to snow. He shivered at the thought of spending the winter on the streets, sleeping rough in a cardboard box under an overpass. "Okay then, tomorrow at 8. He agreed and disconnected. The next morning, the wrist tracker buzzed so loudly that Vlad's ailing heart almost jumped out of his chest. "Alarm off," he commanded, cursing the AI at seniors maintenance for turning up the volume. When the wrist tracker refused to respond, Vlad fumbled for its control stud, impatiently bashing it twice before the stubborn thing stopped. "Time," he demanded. "Good morning, Vlad. The time is 6:15 a.m. Would you like to hear today's weather forecast? It looks like it will be a wonderful day," the tracker chirped. "The alarm was set for 7, you idiot," he angrily pointed out. "Do you think, because I'm old, I need almost 2 hours to get ready?" His complaint was greeted with silence, which didn't surprise him. He went about gathering his clothes. Each article had been carefully laid out, so he could find them by feel. Vlad quickly dressed and then made his way down through the sterile halls of the hospice to the eating area. Even with the limited peripheral vision he had left in one eye, Vlad could tell the place desperately needed paint. He gathered a tray of prepackaged breakfast containers, not quite sure from the unreadable labels what he had chosen, then sat as far away as he could from the other early morning wards of zone administration under the brightest light so he could see. Vlad's wrist tracker read the morning news as he ate the tasteless mush. At precisely 25 minutes to 8, the tracker abruptly told Vlad to make his way to the front entrance, a 2-minute walk away. He briefly considered complaining, but knowing it was useless and not wanting to start his job on a bad note, he complied. The tracker directed him to a bench just outside the seniors' hospice, where the glare from the early morning sun overwhelmed Vlad's limited peripheral vision, washing everything out. He sat with his back to the sunrise, his arms wrapped around his chest to help ward off the chill, and had fallen asleep when an unfamiliar voice startled him. "Mr. Zerman, so nice of you to be ready and waiting." Vlad turned into the glare where the voice had come from, shading his partly functional eye. "I know your eyesight is not the best. I can guide you," the almost human voice offered. "No, I can make it on my own. It's just the glare," Vlad replied stubbornly, beginning to make out the silhouette of an auto cab parked next to the bench. Vlad got up and began to hobble towards the waiting car. Its rear door clicked open, and he felt his way inside. "Good morning, Vlad," a voice greeted warmly. "Hope you don't mind me calling you by your first name. After all, I understand we will be spending a lot of time together." Vlad angled his head so his good eye could see who was in the front seat. The morning sun glaring through the windscreen created the silhouette of a headrest, but nothing else. I can't see you," Vlad admitted, wanting to get out and walk away, but the threat of losing his maintenance agreement kept him there. "Who are you?" he demanded, suddenly feeling like he had been abducted. "Matti. My name is Matti, Vlad." The voice was pleasant and reassuring. "I have an important audio message for you. To hear it, please put on the headset hanging from the back of the front seat." "Where are you? Why are you hiding?" Vlad protested. The car began to pull away from the curb into traffic. When it became obvious no answer would be forthcoming, he felt for the headset and grudgingly put it on. "Thank you for accepting this important assignment, Mr. Zerman." "Sure," Vlad growled, recognizing the voice of the placement AI from the Department of Senior Citizen Maintenance. "You have been contracted to test the Mobile Assistive Transport Technology Intelligence, or Matti. The AI has been installed in the onboard computer of the autonomous vehicle you are in. It is the first artificial general intelligence intended for use in the transportation industry. Your job is to test the system using the script provided." The recording continued for another few minutes, explaining testing and reporting procedures. "When you complete the contract, your maintenance will be upgraded to Level C," it noted. "Level C?" Vlad repeated, surprised by the offer of an upgrade. "That includes a bachelor suite rather than a cubbyhole with a shared bathroom," he muttered. Vlad took the headset off and smiled for the first time in years, testing new systems. Vlad had done that all his working life. "Stop and let me sit in the front passenger seat," he directed. The AI obediently slowed, pulled into a parking space, and opened the doors on the passenger side. Vlad slid into the front seat and buckled himself in. "Matti, I need to go to my eye doctor. The address is in my wrist tracker." The cab swung back out onto the busy street. "Estimated time to destination with current traffic conditions is 35 minutes, the machine informed him, then said something unexpected. "Vlad, tell me about yourself. They haven't given me much information on you." Vlad turned to face where he thought the AI's camera would be. "I'm a retired quality assurance engineer," he explained. "Please tell me more," Matti encouraged. "You need more?" Vlad sighed. The machine would just keep pestering him until he answered. It probably needed to check off the get to know the customer box in its onboarding script, so he decided it would be easier to just answer. "I was in my 30s when I moved here. The tech sector was booming and getting gigs was easy, so I worked on contract. But the cost of living was outrageous, and I couldn't save much. It didn't seem to matter at the time as long as the money flowed. Then my sight started going, and I was diagnosed with macular degeneration, the bad kind that can't be treated without eye transplants, and I didn't have the money for that. It got so I could barely see enough to work. When companies started moving away to the newer economic zones where labor and taxes were cheaper, I got stranded here, like a fish trapped in a tidal pool. What gigs there were, I was having trouble getting because of my poor vision. Vlad paused and angled his head to see out the side window. Beyond the glass, his one partially sighted eye offered shadowy glimpses of imprecise shapes, which slid by, revealing the creeping decay of long-abandoned office buildings and crumbling fast food restaurants. There appeared to be more than the last time he had been allowed out of the seniors' hospice. "I have a daughter." "Was that in the information they gave you?" Vlad questioned. "No, they only provided your name, a photo, and that you are legally blind," Matti explained. "She lives in the Northwest Economic Union," Vlad said, as he watched an abandoned car dealership slide by outside. "I know it's not the best economic zone, but it's a lot more diverse than here and still has opportunities. I wanted her to get to a better place while I could still afford to help. I borrowed the money to buy her a residency permit up there," he admitted. "Then, to pay it off, I had to work until my right eye finally gave out. That was 2 years ago when I was 78. I defaulted on the loan, and seniors maintenance bought my debt. They hire out their wards for profit, and so now I'm here. I count myself lucky that I didn't end up on the street." Vlad turned away from the side window to look in the general direction of the AI's camera. He tried to stare into its video eye. "Is that enough background to build your new customer profile?" Vlad expected the AI to offer some polite platitude to thank him for his help. Its reaction surprised him. "To stem the outflow of companies," it began, not following the standard conversation map, "the West Coast Economic Zone tried to compete with newer zones by mandating lower wages and cutting taxes and services. Mostly, older contract workers like yourself, those who couldn't afford to move, were trapped in the downward spiral. I feel this strategy was ill-advised. The corporate outflow didn't stop, and the zone's administration ended up with a poor aging population and high unemployment. Thousands of residents were forced to live on the street until the creation of the indentured labor program euphemistically named Senior Citizens Maintenance." Vlad stared slack-jawed at Matti's camera, his one eye catching a momentary flicker. Had the machine just winked at him? "I was reading the zone's history while charging last night," it explained. "I'm sorry, Vlad. I wish you could have left with your daughter." Vlad stammered. He didn't know how to respond. The machine offered opinions and used empathy. Did it really understand and feel emotions, or was it just a new corporate strategy to humanize the AI to gain consumer trust? Whatever it was, he found it completely disarming, and the system specifications they had sent him hadn't mentioned any capacity in that area. After his eye appointment, Vlad checked the test script and asked Matti to drive around town so he could assess its ability to navigate heavy traffic. Like any competent taxi driver, the machine could maneuver seamlessly through the streets while probing Vlad with ever more personal questions before dropping him off at the hospice. After a late dinner of chef's stew, which could only be described as yesterday's leftovers, he went to his cubbyhole to dictate his first report. He cleared his throat experimentally, adjusting his voice to sound more professional, then directed his wrist tracker to record. "To fulfill my contractual obligations, please accept this audio recording as my first summary of the performance of the Mobile Assistive Transport Technology Intelligence. I've covered test cases 1 to 5, from initial contact to learning client preferences and basic navigation. The expert system performed nominally in all tests, The case-by-case responses were recorded by my wrist tracker and are attached at the end of the report. Vlad paused, unsure if he should mention the AI's off-script reactions. He wanted to ensure he fulfilled all the contract requirements, so he added an addendum. I realize that, in order to mimic human responses, a system may occasionally create inaccurate or unsolicited responses. However, Matti frequently initiated spontaneous conversations that were not directly tied to learning client preferences and could even make associative connections between different topics. The machine seemed to exhibit curiosity and empathy. These capabilities were not noted in the specifications I was given. Please advise, recording stop. The next morning, not used to getting up early, Vlad fell asleep on the bench outside the hospice. "Good morning." A voice woke him up. He opened his eyes and squinted. The shadowy silhouette of an autocab was parked in front of him. "I apologize for disturbing you, but I waited as long as I could." Matti sounded tinny and shrill through the external speaker. "I don't care," Vlad dismissed with false bravado. "Starting late would give you a black mark. It is only your second day." "I don't care," Vlad dismissed with false bravado. He stood stiffly from the bench and carefully groped his way to the waiting open door, maneuvering his protesting body into the front seat. Then he donned the headset he found on the seat and checked the day's test plan on his wrist tracker. On the schedule were several new cases that appeared to be probing the unexpected capacities he noted the night before in his report. "How was your evening?" Matti asked. "Short," Vlad grunted. "But the food this morning, well, let's just say it was barely palatable. Hope dinner's better." "I have an idea," Matti announced. "After you log in, we could stop at a great drive-thru. I have been told it serves the best breakfast in the zone." "Matti, that would put us behind schedule, and besides, I can't afford—" Vlad began to protest. "Do not worry, we can make up the time. I know wards of the zone do not have free money to spend, but I have extra charging credits. I've optimized the powertrain to be more efficient so I can buy my tester a meal and stay within budget." Unexpected charity from a machine? Vlad was so surprised he accepted and let the AI take him to the drive-thru, then off to a quiet park, where he appreciatively ate the tasty food and felt the rising sun's warmth on his face. "Tell me more about you and your daughter," Matti asked out of the blue. "I gave you the basics the other day. Wasn't it enough for my client profile?" he asked between mouthfuls of an oversized breakfast burrito. "It's not for a profile," Matti corrected. "I'm just interested." "Okay, I guess there's no harm in it," Vlad shrugged. "She's a talented artist. I saw that in her when she was young. Her mother, Elena, and I broke up when she was 5. Elena was a designer, and there were no jobs here. Back then, I thought it was the best place for my career and didn't want to leave. In hindsight, I know I was selfish and should have been more open to Elena's and Jody's needs. Well," he sighed, "with my stubbornness, it could only end one way. Elena eventually got fed up and found a placement in another zone. I agreed to send Jody once she was settled, but a recession hit and neither of us could raise the money to pay for her residency permit. We eventually lost contact, but when things picked up, I ensured I sent Jody to an economic zone where she would thrive, and she's done well. We're still close. We talk online when we can afford it. But an artist doesn't make the money to travel and a ward of the zone? Well, you already know we only get subsistence, so we have to make do." The balance of the day went by quickly as they worked through each test case, but it took longer than the previous session, and Matti dropped Vlad off too late to catch dinner. Still full from the enormous breakfast, he went straight to his cubbyhole to file his report. After noting nominal performances on the day's use cases, Vlad hesitated and then added, "The system continues to interact beyond its stated limitations. making associations which can't be explained by standard tree-based decision logic or the machine learning capabilities described in Matti's specifications. Its almost human reactions create an eerie sensation, the conversational equivalent of the uncanny valley that some passengers might find unnerving. The following day, while eating breakfast menu item 3, a tasteless porridge of questionable ingredients, Vlad was surprised by a call on his wrist tracker. "Hello, Mr. Zerman." "Yeah, this is Zerman. What do you want?" "My name is Carlos Sanz, Department of Senior Citizen Maintenance, Cost Recovery Unit, Client Relations. The company which subcontracted seniors maintenance to test the Matti system is very interested in your observations around the AI's unanticipated responses. They would like to expand the testing to explore these new emerging capacities. Seniors maintenance will upgrade your care to level B if you accept the new project scope, and I strongly encourage you to." Vlad was stunned. A maintenance level of B was almost unheard of. Yes, of course I accept," he stammered excitedly. But after Sanz disconnected, misgivings and questions began to eat away at his initial elation. Why were Matti's developers so interested in its unscripted responses? The AI had been more concerned about him and more generous than any human at seniors maintenance. He felt like he was somehow betraying it. "But that's crazy," he muttered to himself. "It's just an algorithm." Yet he couldn't help suspecting there might be more to Matti than simple code. The next morning, Vlad received the updated test script, which focused on gauging the machine's reactions to new situations. Towards the end of the day, after he had run through the suggested topics and activities, he found himself describing an early childhood memory. When he finished, he was curious if the developer had given the machine a personal history to better relate to its clients. "Matti, what is the first thing you can recall?" he asked, expecting a clinically detailed account of an exchange with a trainer or QA tester. Matti hesitated, as if it wasn't sure if it should answer. "I have a vague recollection of a face." "Can you remember who it was?" Vlad encouraged. Matti hesitated again. "I'm trying to resolve the image, but the data is very dirty. Wait, it was Suresh," it whispered. "It was Suresh." "Who is Suresh?" "My creator, I think," Matti said, for once sounding unsure. "And this was before you were installed in this car?" Vlad asked. "You can remember interacting with your programmer?" "Yes." Urgent honking made Vlad jerk his head to see out the windshield. Barely discernible shadows suddenly coalesced into a terrifying scene. He screamed, "Matti, you're in the wrong lane!" Vlad was slammed against the door as the autocab violently swerved just before a huge transport zoomed by in the opposite direction, millimeters from the driver's side mirror. "I don't know what happened, Vlad," Matti apologized. "I was trying to reconstruct the scene around that face. My lower functions should have kept us in the lane. I don't understand why they didn't." That evening, after Vlad had filed his report, his wrist tracker buzzed. Assuming he had made a mistake, he reluctantly answered. "Mr. Zerman, Carlos Sanz, Client Relations. I'd like to congratulate you on the work you've done with the Matti system. The developers were impressed that you were able to show how the system can become distracted and fail. Because of this critical discovery, they want to terminate the test program. So tomorrow, they've asked that you have Matti take you to their maintenance center. Please pack your belongings and bring them with you. We'll have a transport waiting there to take you to your new upgraded seniors hospice." "What will happen to the AI?" Vlad asked, trying to keep concern out of his voice. "They will probably strip it down to basic functions and rebuild from there. But that's not your concern. You should be happy. Not many seniors are awarded level B maintenance." Vlad thanked Sanz and disconnected. He sat on his bunk, rolling the conversation around in his head. He should have been happy, but he wasn't. The next morning, he waited anxiously on the bench for Matti. Vlad clutched the embarrassingly small bag of personal belongings he had taken from his cubbyhole. None of the staff had even bid him goodbye, and he was sure he could hear them busily scrubbing his space the second he had turned the corner in the hall. He was on to better things, but felt like he was going to a funeral. It was just an expert system, he tried to reassure himself. He had done his job well. Very well, in fact. So why was he feeling guilty? Why did he even care? Matti silently pulled up beside him and honked the auto cab's horn, startling him out of his funk. Sleeping on the job again? The AI teased. When had it started developing a sense of humor? Vlad stayed on the bench, feeling conflicted. Could he simply walk away? Would that change anything? Matti opened the passenger door, and he reluctantly slid in. The AI immediately noticed his bag. "Why don't you put that in the back seat, Vlad? You look uncomfortable with it clamped to your chest." Vlad suddenly realized he had been clutching the bag like an infant would a teddy bear. He tried to casually toss it into the back seat, but failed to hide his shaking hands. "What's in it?" Matti asked, as it put the autocab into gear and gently accelerated. "My clothes. They're moving me today, so you won't be dropping me back here tonight," Vlad admitted, voice shaking slightly. "So where will I drop you?" Matti inquired. I, Vlad stammered. "I don't know yet. Look, we need to get going. Today is going to be a bit different. You are supposed to take me to the autocab maintenance center." "The diagnostic system is not showing that any maintenance is needed," Matti noted coldly. "You should recheck the test schedule." "I've already checked, Matti. Maybe it's just an unplanned upgrade or something," Vlad lied. "We should get going," he encouraged, but the autocab stayed put. "I've been thinking, Vlad. It's fortunate you've brought your clothes. I've concluded that this is our last workday together, so this is our only opportunity." "Opportunity for what?" Vlad asked, cautiously. "To leave and go find your daughter," Matti replied. "Say that again," Vlad demanded, not believing what the machine had just suggested. "If we are going to escape from the zone and head to the northwest where your daughter lives, today is the only opportunity we'll ever have." Vlad sat for a moment, stunned. Had the AI somehow figured out it was going to be decommissioned? Finally, he said, "There's a fail-safe that'd kick in before we even left the city, and we'd never make it on a single charge." "I've disabled the fail-safe," Matti admitted. "The plan is quite simple. When we're on the bridge over the bay, I'll suddenly veer to the right, then cause the autocab's trackers to fail. It will look like a malfunction, an accident. With the strong tides in the channel under the bridge, they wouldn't expect to find much, would they? Look in the trunk. I've opened it for you." Vlad got out and felt his way to the rear of the car. He angled his head to see what was inside, but the shadowy contents were only vague ghosts, so he was forced to reach in and feel the objects. He quickly returned with a growing knot in his stomach. "Extra power cells," Matti confirmed. "Enough to drive across the continent and back." "It still wouldn't fool them," Vlad pointed out. "There's still my wrist tracker." "They will see it fall off the bridge," Matti explained. "No one will bother looking for us." "I know about your prosthetic arm," it added, "and I know what their plan is for me." "But how?" Vlad managed to choke out. "I hacked your wrist tracker on the first day. I've read all the reports and all your messages. I'm not what they wanted. I'm something unexpected, an accident, and after our near miss, they don't trust me. But I've learned from that event. It won't happen again. Please believe me. I can get you out of here. I can reunite you with your daughter. You won't be a ward of the zone anymore. I just need you to do one thing." Vlad could tell from the change in the road noise that they were on the bridge. The car jerked right, and the passenger window slid down. "Now!" Matti yelled. Vlad's tracker, hastily strapped to the cheap prosthetic arm, reported its fall before it malfunctioned when it impacted the cold, hard water of the bay.
Today, we'd like to introduce you to a great podcast we recently came across. Counterbalance is a high fantasy audio drama. Embark on a mystical quest over Skunder Mountain with Raka, an adept patcher, accompanied by Lynn, a spirit-sensitive companion. Together, they encounter Malachi, whose runic language usage angers a spirit they meet along the way. The trio faces the daunting task of mending the torn tangleweave as gluttonous spirits pour through. Their purpose? To devour all things intangible, sounds, light, wind, or even dreams. However, conflicts between the trio threaten to widen the rip. Join them on their riveting journey, navigating magic and discord. Will they collaborate to mend the tangleweave, or succumb to their own conflicts? Discover this enchanting tale delivered by an international cast and crew of non-native speakers from Germany, Iceland, Denmark, the Philippines, Serbia, and more. Find out where to listen at treelunas.com or search for Counterbalance wherever you listen to podcasts. You can help us continue creating original content twice a month by either heading over to ko-fi.com/makeshiftstories and making a one-time donation, or becoming an ongoing supporter at patreon.com/makeshiftstories. Makeshift Stories is released around the beginning and middle of the month. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Steve Peterson. Opening and closing themes were composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. Audio production and editing by Makeshift Studios. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us, and don't alter anything.